Hi, Richard. Thank you very much for speaking with me today. We're going to speak a little bit about your recent announcements, the PFS and the interim results. So thank you for joining me for that conversation.
Well, thank you, Megan. It's very nice to be here. It's been a little while.
Just before we start off, just how openly can you speak at the moment?
Frankly, not as openly as I'd like. Normally, one would expect, having put the interims out, that the company might be out of a close period, but for reasons I can't discuss, we are still in a close period, and so I will have to restrict myself a little bit on the topics and indeed what I say.
Okay, thank you for that. That's noted. Can we start by talking about how the interims have been received by the market, and perhaps it hasn't been as positive as you might have liked it to be?
I think that would be the understatement of the year. No, I'm obviously very disappointed by the way the market has reacted, but I believe and I can understand. So let's just hit the bond investment thing on the head to start with, and then we can have a more productive conversation, I hope. So there is no problem with the bond investor. They are legally subscribed to $80 million worth of bonds. The subscription agreement provided that they would put up the first 30 million over, I think it was a 5-month period from initial funding, which was early June, and the remaining 50 million over the following 5 months. Mm-hmm. We agreed an indicative drawdown schedule, which we published. Maybe that was a mistake, but that was indicative. And at the time, it was predicated on release of a pre-feasibility study in June or July, which was the intention. For perfectly good reason, which I'll come on to, the pre-feasibility study was delayed until last week. And as a result, NIU Invest basically said, look, can we see the PFS in final format? And then let's talk about what you need to make it happen. And we said, sure, that's fine. So as far as we're concerned, they're there for the money, that they remain fully supportive. We're in regular contact with them. And I don't think people need worry about them being behind the company. So I remain of the view that the construction of the Idaho mine is fully funded, and we'll have the cash to do what we need to do that when required.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you for that background. So now we've discussed that, perhaps you can talk a little bit about the highlights from both the PFS and the interim results.
Well, the interim results, from an accounting point of view, there's frankly not much of a highlight, really. We're still at the development stage, so clearly we've got overheads and no revenue, so we're reporting a loss. I will perhaps repeat what I've said before, which is that we do run a tight ship. We keep administrative costs to a minimum. We don't have an office in the UK. You know, all our overheads, you know, are operational in nature and in the US. And we do try as far as we can to protect the company balance sheet. And I think anyone who looks at our results over the previous few years will see that the company has always reported far better results than the consolidated group, indeed a small profit on 1 or 2 occasions. And that, to me anyway, is important, because at the end of the day, if we want to pay dividends, it's the company is the entity that will pay the dividends, not the group. Okay. And so the cleaner I can keep the company balance sheet, when the cash flow and the profits flow, the quicker I can tidy it up, and you know, prudence permitting and working capital permitting, we can put ourselves into a dividend paying situation, which remains our strategy, or part of our strategy, as we've consistently said. Okay. So I think that's all I would say on the interims from an accounting point of view. From the PFS point of view, well, the 2 key takeouts for me, firstly, is the $153 million of free cash flow generated over the 8-year mine life. Mm-hmm. And to emphasize that is free cash flow. That's what would be returned to us. So that is net of all capital expenditure, which is shown at 62.6 million in the pre-fees, and all sustaining capital. So that is 153 million of clean capital, if you like. Mm-hmm. The other point I'd perhaps like to draw out is the cash cost of production of $2.44 a pound. which gives us significant leeway and margin between that and the prevailing and potentially future copper price. And puts us, as Marcus has, tried to emphasize in his chairman's report this morning, well down the cost curve in terms of cash costs of production. So we're in pretty good shape there, I would suggest. There's also still plenty of room to improve that PFS. We've already built in some pre-used equipment, second-hand equipment into that capital cost, but Ryan is working hard to identify further items, and there is one in particular that we may well be able to procure, and if he can do that, that capital cost is coming down by quite a few million. So we'll have to wait and see. But obviously also operating costs, we'll be looking at that and doing all the usual stuff. So we're quite pleased with the PFS. We've got a robust project there with plenty of room for improvement, and we're looking forward to getting on with it.
Okay. And can you tell me how the upgrading of the mineral resources into reserves fits into this?
Well, that's important because resources don't have all the economics hung on them. Reserves do. So reporting a reserve is reporting what is actually economically mineable. And therefore, the pre-feasibility being based on a reserve and not a resource is hugely important because it's based on reality. It's not based on hope, if you see what I mean. So there's still scope, I believe, to extract more metal, because as we mine it, stuff that's left as resource might well become reserve. But let's just stick with the numbers we've got. So Ryan had to complete the reserve in order to move into a feasibility study. So that's all been done, and that's why we can put a great deal of belief in the feasibility study. And what Ryan will now do is complete the detailed engineering. We can carry on with construction, certainly on patented land, as we wish, while we're waiting for the relevant permitting on the unpatented land primarily. And so the timelines that we're looking at remain in place, and this pre-feasibility study is really the launch pad.
Okay, right. Thank you for that. And can you also tell us a little bit about the sulfides?
Well, that's the elephant in the room. So let's start with the delay in the pre-feasibility study.
Okay.
We've spoken many times about now being able to recover copper, gold, and silver at the same time. That's obviously important, because not long ago, we had a project that was going to heap leach copper, and 2 years later, we were going to build another plant and try to recover the gold and the silver. So Ryan has now devised a circuit that will recover all three metals from day one, and we won't be heap leaching. So as Marcus has pointed out again in his statement, that means that once we start processing, we're not waiting 90 days for ore to leach on a pad. We'll be producing the product within 24 hours or whatever it is. So that's important. But the other key thing which developed over the course of the summer is the processing circuit will now process sulfide material. Okay. That's the game changer, because to put all this into context, the open pit grade is 0.66% copper. That's still above the global average for copper mines, which I understand is a little less than 0.5%. But you look at our high-grade underground deposit, which was historically mined at 6 to 8%, and we've intercepted with drilling that we've done 8.38%. So we're reconfirming what we believed already. There's a huge amount of work still to be done on the sulfides, but the sulfides, as I said, are the elephant in the room. Now, I've been quoted at least twice as saying that I believe that Phoenix has the potential to be $1 billion company. And I still believe that. Leaving aside any M&A activity that may or may not happen, for Phoenix to become $1 billion company on the back of Empire, it cannot happen on the open pit deposit, which is purely the tip of the iceberg. We're just taking the top off the mountain. It's a little bit of it. But what underneath is, it's exciting, because that's open at depth, open along strike, stretches for kilometers. We don't know how deep it is, but we do know that they were mining 6 to 8% in the the first half of the last century. In the latter days, before the mine shut down, they were taking out over 4% tungsten. They were recovering gold, silver, zinc, etc. The drilling that we've done has reconfirmed that and just wets our lips for what potentially is there. And the significance of the processing plant as it is now configured is that we can put sulfide ore into that. So we've now devised a scheme, and we hope to do this over the winter to drive an adit, I believe 700 feet into the Empire mine, right into the heart of that 8.38% copper. We know exactly where it is. And I don't know how many months it will take to drive the adit. That will depend on whether it's one shift, two shifts, or whatever. Ryan will sort that out. But it's not inconceivable that we could be in the heart of the underground deposit, creating drill chambers along the adit as we go along, and then starting to drill from within the deposit to delineate, an initial area to mine, which we could then, as I understand it, blast and remove the ore. So we potentially could be in production, if you like, from the underground mine by middle of next year, potentially. And I mean, this is enormous, because if we can then start to truly demonstrate what's in the mountain, what's really there, because we're bringing it out, as opposed to what we think is there, because we drilled some of it, we're starting to bring forward the true value or the potential value of that underground deposit. And therefore, I mean, this is 2 to 3 years ahead of when we were planning to do this. I think that's incredibly exciting. So apart from that, from a market cap point of view, blending that high grade ore with the oxide ore, we don't know the economics of it yet because we haven't worked out tonnages or anything, but it doesn't take much to know that if you blend ore that might be as high as 8% with 0.66% open pit ore, we're going to be putting higher feed into the plant and recovering more copper and improving the economics and the cash flow. So that's very exciting. But I'm equally excited about the fact that we can start reporting from inside the underground ore body and starting to tell the market what we've really got there. And I repeat what I said before, if what we've got there is anything like what we genuinely believe is there, we can be $1 billion company on Empire.
Great, thank you. That all sounds very exciting. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
There's quite a lot I'd like to add, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. So with regret, Megan, we'll have to look forward to that next time. Hopefully fairly soon.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Richard. Thank you for the conversation.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.